Betina, and I have alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, which is the genetic lung disease which causes emphysema. And 4 years ago, I had a double lung transplant, and my life has changed tremendously, dramatically. Prior to that, I was on oxygen full-time for 6 years. I did everything, including shower, everything that you can think of on oxygen. And I also raised 3 boys at the same time. But I wanted to start out and just tell you that they talk about the fact that this is adult onset, but the thing is, from my own personal experience, I've had this all my life. I've lived with it. Obviously, you're born with it. But I've had respiratory problems ever since I was a little child. When I had my tonsils out at 3 years old, my pediatrician told me when I did the application to college, he thought I may have had pneumonia. But I've never had pneumonia after that. I just would end up being sick at least once or twice a year. And when I was in boarding school and college, I would always end up in the infirmary. And I always seemed to have this affinity towards the nurses. And I didn't want to have anything to do with them, but it seemed that any award I'd get it from the nurse, which really made me feel weird. But I didn't have children. I had my first child at 36, so I think this might come on more sooner if you have children earlier. It really hit me. I mean, I was able to manage it. I lived in New York City. I would walk home. I did the exercise. I lived in an apartment, never climbed stairs. So, but we moved to Tokyo for 2 years, and I can tell you that walking up and down those hills in Tokyo was really, really difficult. And I wouldn't take my 1-year-old son on the subway because I knew I just couldn't carry him and the stroller on the stairs up the subway. So when I was 41, we came back here, we moved to Connecticut, and I had a complete physical, and they did a spirometry on me, and they made me do it 3 times, and the nurse rolled her eyes, and nothing was said about it ever again. So when I was finally diagnosed with alpha-1, I went back and I called the doctor, because that doctor was actually the wife of my present GP, and they had my records, and it turned out I had 61% lung function, and I was 41 years old, and nothing was ever done about it. I think in those days, maybe they didn't think there was much they could do with lung disease. The female GP started specializing in something else, so I went to her husband, and when he didn't give me a refill on antibiotics, I ended up going to an allergy doctor for years. And then eventually, and he told me I had asthma, which I'd never heard, because, and I think I have had asthma all my life, because I knew I couldn't overdo it, because if I overdid it, I would wheeze at night. So I knew that I couldn't push myself the way you see a lot of people here in New York who are really very compulsive and you know, work-oriented. I knew I could only go so far. Anyway, I ended up in the ER, and eventually saw the 2 pulmonologists in the town I had, and the first one didn't give me a lung function test, a complete lung function test, and the second one told me about alpha-1, but he said, you're lucky that you don't have it, because it's deadly, fatal. Yeah. So I went on like this, and he gave me puffers, and I said, how come I can't walk down the hall? He said, you know, you have what you have. And I ended up in the ER again. Most of the time I thought I, as an adult person, could be my own advocate, but I have to say, in my case, it's a man's world. And it was only when my husband, it was on Super Bowl Sunday in 1996, so he was there, and he went to the ER with me, and when they wanted to discharge me again, he said she can't walk down the hall without getting out of breath. And of course, I had said this lots of times, and no one listened to me. So they took me for a walk with all these little contraptions on me. Bells and whistles went off, and they went in a football huddle, and they came back and they said, we think we know what it is. And 2 weeks later, I was told I had alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. And I was almost relieved to know that there was something, because this never hurt. I mean, except when I had, you know, acute exacerbations of COPD, it never hurt. I just knew that if I was going to the soccer field, I'd let the other parents go first, and I'd tie my shoe or something, because I could walk slower, because I would start wheezing and get out of breath. My lung function, when I was diagnosed, was about 25% predicted. That's really low. But they never talked about transplant. What happened was that I found out that there was alpha-1 organizations, the Alpha-1 Association, and they had a conference, and that you network with these people and other people who needed transplants, and we talked about it, and I was the one who initiated getting listed for a transplant. Actually, I asked my husband to call the doctor because I really felt at this point the only way we're going to get through everything was to have my husband talk. Especially if you're on oxygen, you can't think because you don't have any, your gray matter is, dying off because you aren't getting oxygen. And anyway, so eventually I started off at the University of Pennsylvania until the Columbia Presbyterian program got back on its feet. My pulmonologist from the University of Pennsylvania came up to run the program. And in 2004, Thanksgiving Sunday 2004, I had a double lung transplant. And life changed immediately. I was breathing before they took me off I was intubated. I was breathing before they removed it. And life has just gotten better every day.